Production support for award-winning News 6 has come from Whirlpool Corporation's Finland Division, working to make your life a little easier. Additional support has come from the Northwest Ohio Educational Technology Foundation and from this public television station.
Hi, I'm Chris Ward.
And I'm Shona Huff from Liberty Center Elementary School in Liberty Center, Ohio. Here's what you'll be seeing on News 6 today.
The making of apple cider. An old-fashioned way to hunt. Men who like to speed.
Hi, and welcome to News 6. I'm Keith Leatherman from Liberty Center Elementary School in Liberty Center, Ohio. Here with our first story is Tracy Huffman.
Apple cider is a drink that almost everyone enjoys, but have you ever wondered how it was made? We visit Ron and Pat Shimeen's cider barn and apple orchard to find out.
Mr. Shimeen, how did you get started in this business?
Well, a friend of mine, very close friend of mine, this was his homestead. He was born and raised here, and his parents passed away a few years ago, and we decided to move out and rejuvenate the orchard that his father had started approximately in the late 60s.
What is the process of making apple cider?
Well, it's, to be very short, the process starts with trimming the trees in the spring and applying the proper sprays and fertilizers so that the various insects and funguses do not destroy the crop. And in the fall, then you pick the apples. We put them into cold storage and keep the temperature at about 33 degrees. And at that point, when we're ready to make cider, we take them out and we grind up the apples into a pomace, or a very fine pulp. And you take this pulp and load it into cloth racks and use a hydraulic press and squeeze the pomace into the cider, and then store the cider in a refrigerated tank.
Okay. How many bushels of apple does it take to make a gallon of cider?
Actually, it's probably the other way around. It takes about 1 bushel of apples will make about 3.5 gallons of cider. This was our first year, and we made approximately 1,500 gallons.
Where do you sell this cider?
Primarily, we sell all of our cider through wholesale outlets and farm markets that you see along the roads. And we sell to various groups such as the Boy Scouts for fundraising drives, etc.
Thank you, Mr. Shimeen.
Today's show is being produced by Mrs. Sharon Lee, Mr. Harry Tenery, and Mr. Jerry Oberhouse's 6th grade classes. Liberty Center is located in Henry County, about 30 miles from Bowling Green. The town was founded in 1860 and has a current population of 1,111.
Don Sharp thinks using a bow and arrow is the most challenging way to hunt. He makes his own equipment and recently showed us how he makes bows.
Mr. Sharp, how did you get started making bows and arrows?
Well, Keith, I guess you know I'm an industrial arts teacher, and I'm also a bow hunter. So it just kind of was a natural thing for me to want to make my own bows. And after you make the first one, you can't stop, because you look at that first one and you realize that you could have done a better job. There's always two or three things you could change. And then you make the next one, and it just keeps on going. So I've made like 18 bows now, and I still want to make another one to see if I can't improve the design a little bit.
How long does it take to make one bow?
Well, if you put all the hours together, it takes 4 hours for each limb to cure. So you got 2 limbs with the type of bow that I make. It's a takedown bow. So that's 8 hours right there. And then I suppose the handwork, I suppose you'd have around 15 or 16 hours in it altogether.
What steps are involved in making a bow?
Well, basically the limb is put together, is made up of 5 different layers in the limbs that I make. It's called a composite limb. I've got 3 maple laminations in the interior of the limb, and then I've got a face and a back that's made of fiberglass. And probably the first task is to get all that glued together. And After you have the limbs made, of course, you've got to shape the limb. You notice that the original limb out of the press would be square. Well, I've got to put a taper on it. Okay, I've got to glue tips on it. I've got to put the grooves in it. Then I've got to mount the limb on a handle section. You can see this bow right here. This individual limb had to be put on a handle. Probably the most difficult part is getting that limb on this handle straight, because you can really, you know, if you had one tip setting off center and you strung the bow up, then that limb would bend to one side. So that's kind of difficult. Well, then you have to bandsaw the general shape of the handle out and do a lot of file work to make the bow handle fit your hand real nice.
What do you do with the bows and arrows that you make?
Well, I guess my compassion for bow making started with my compassion for hunting. I like to hunt different animals. It's a real challenge to get them with a bow and arrow. I miss a lot more than I ever hit.
Hobbies are usually quiet things to do, but race car driving is just the opposite. Gary Perry showed us his car and talked to us about racing.
Circle dirt track racing is an exciting, fast-paced sport. Gary Perry has won several trophies and prizes since he started. Mr. Perry, how did you first get interested in racing?
Well, the first time I got interested was a school teacher I had in the 11th grade at a vocational school. And then a friend of mine, a couple years later, raced at a local track, and I went and watched him a few times.
When was your first race?
Oh, 1978. I got together with this friend that I knew, and we built a car together. He raced it at one track, and then I raced it at another track.
Could you tell us about your car?
Yes, this car is made with a tubing chassis, and it's made for racing. And we took the chassis and cut it off and put Ford front suspension on it, which we have to run for the class that we run in. And it's made lighter because of the aluminum body. It's got a fiberglass hood and a fiberglass top, and it's got a tubing rear frame for lightness, and it's all open underneath because of the airflow to go through it. And the motor we modify in the inside, but we can't do nothing to it on the outside. Then for safety equipment, we got a racing seat, racing belts, and the roll cage is made of 95,006 inch thick steel, which is a minimum for stock car racing.
Where do you race?
I race at Oakshade Raceway and Bryan Motor Speedway usually, and then sometimes I'll go to other tracks in Ohio.
Thank you, Mr. Perry.
Thank you.
That's all for this week's show. Join us again next week when News 6 travels to Lima, Ohio.